Well, everyone, welcome back to a very exciting episode of the Storybox podcast. This woman that I am about to speak to and you're about to get to know has been endorsed by Oprah as her work as being revolutionary and life-changing. Her name is Dr. Shefali. Now, she has a few New York Times best-selling books. The first one is The Conscious Parent and The Awaken Family, which is the second one. She has a new book coming out, which is called A Radical Awakening, which I highly encourage you to go and get a copy. And I am so looking forward to this conversation today. Dr. Shefali, welcome so much to the Storybox podcast.
Thank you. It's such a pleasure to be here with you.
The pleasure is all mine to have you here. Now, I need to get this out of the way before we dive into your backstory and everything like that. I listened to an episode that you did with, I believe it was Kerwin Ray, and you said something that was quite profound to me and has helped me all along the way, which has been, you said, everyone is accessible. You just have to find a way to access them. And you're the one that reached out to Oprah and you're able to get a meeting with Oprah, which is quite inspiring. So I just wanted to say thank you so much for those words, if I didn't butcher them. Yeah. So
I think people have, fear to reach out to people, and that's understandable. But I think if we have done our work and we've put in the effort and we think we have a unique message, then we need to be brave to kind of find the reception for it. And I'm not talking about people who don't have that message cultivated, but somebody like you or me, we've been cultivating a message for so long, but then we're so intimidated to reach out to people who are as human as we are. And when you do, sometimes you cast a wide net and somebody or the other does reach back, and then you build your reception in that way.
Which is what I've realized doing this, reaching out to many different people. And I've realized that what connects us all is our unique story. And if we can learn to just, be present with one another for just a moment, then we're able to change a lot of people's perspectives. We can help people realize that they are worth something. And your new book, A Radical Awakening, actually deals with fear, which I'm very excited to get into in just a moment. But before we do that, my very first question officially to you, this is a question I ask everyone at the very beginning. It's, what does success look like for you?
Freedom. So success to me is when you have liberated yourself from the clutches of culture and other people's opinions, and you are able to be authentically yourself without the gripping, clawing fear of rejection, disapproval, and unworthiness.
Have you yourself found it difficult to live this free life over the years?
Yes, I've had to break out of a lot of conditioning that was keeping me small. And that's why I wrote this book for women, especially called The Radical Awakening, because we are so conditioned to play small, especially women, and to always believe we're not good enough. So that is what is the eternal cage. The cage is never really something on the outside. It's always the perception of ourselves and the image we hold of ourselves. And if we hold an image of ourselves that our love depends, or our self-worth depends on this external source, we will forever be enslaved. So part of my life had to do with breaking down all my internal conditionings around unworthiness and playing small, and really deconstructing where that came from, the messages from my culture, and finding that replenishment of worth from within myself. So that was the pivoting shift, and I still grapple with it. There's no such thing as a pristine level of freedom, but I at least know what is the block, and the block is always this perception of unworthiness.
So for you specifically, was it mainly just cultural expectations or cultural conditioning, or was there something more than that?
Right. So I always say that typically for people, it's two sources of unworthiness that constantly feed us. One comes from culture, and culture telling us how to be a woman or a man and how to be successful or beautiful. And then is the trauma of your own childhood conditioning. A lot of people had parents, most of us had parents who were unconscious and embedded us with legacies of this unworth.
Mm.
I didn't have that from my parents. I actually grew up with a very healthy attachment, but I definitely still couldn't be buffered from culture.
Mm. So how do we actually, for ourselves and for a person right now that is actually struggling and they're wrestling with their worth right now, with trying to break free from this conditioning, what advice would you give to them? Like what strategies surrounding that?
Well, I think the first step, and people don't really think this is a step, but it's always the first step, is to be aware of one's patterns. And awareness is internal, so it doesn't feel like a step. It's not a doing on the external. It's an internal, palpable shift where you begin to go, aha,
Mm.
I am the constant in my life. I am the one who is obviously co creating some patterns here. And we can blame the other and be resentful and gripe and groan and complain about the partner, the boss, the friend, or the child. But it's when you are willing to look in the mirror and pause and go, I'm the constant. So,
Mm.
how am I co perpetuating my patterns? And that awareness propels and propagates a domino effect of behavioral change. You can't change behaviorally long lastingly unless you have a deep internal awareness that we are palpably propagating our own inner oppression.
Mm. And you mentioned uh, being a child there and the kind of teachings that we do pass down to our kids. Kids are very smart, and I think we miss that. Like they're very observant with the world around them, and they pick up things relatively quickly, or at least I did growing up. So, what sort of questions should we be telling, or should we be telling a child? Hey, you need to be asking these kinds of questions in order to know your worth growing up.
Well, I don't know whether the child should bear the onus for having worth. It's really, and that's why all my work around conscious parenting focuses on the parent entering a sense of wholeness and abundance so that they don't project this incompletion or this lack onto their children. So, as long as the parent is projecting lack and unmet need onto the child is defenseless. The
Mm.
child is just like you said, absorbing the world around them. So, but what can a conscious parent do? A conscious parent can make sure before giving an opinion, before sermonizing, before lecturing their kid, to ask their kid, well, what works for you? What is right for you? What's authentic for you? It's more important that you follow yourself. And for that conscious parent to be aware that they cannot dump their expectations on their children. And if we're very conscious and very careful, we back off from that projection and allow the child to fumble and discover and maybe fail, but finally arrive at their own authentic expression of themselves.
So failure is actually a good thing for a child?
What, sorry?
So failure is actually a good thing for a child?
Yes, because it's inevitable. But when the parent has hangups around their own failures, then they're going to resist it when their child experiences failure. And they're going to fix it and jump in and get angry and feel out of control. But what we parents don't understand is that our children's failure has nothing to do with us. But we can only feel that way when we come from wholeness, when we have identified with our children as if they are an extension of ourselves, then everything they do or don't do matters greatly to how we feel about ourselves. That's why I tell parents, you do your own work so that you're not constantly titrating your sense of worth based on your kid's A grade or C grade or your kid's weight or their destiny. You are able to separate your journey from their journey. And that is the most important gift we can give our children, the liberty to discover themselves, to live their own journey.
Mm. So as parents, we're more or less guiding the child along in this journey. We're not necessarily like trying to brand them down in any kind of way.
Yes, we're just ushers and guides. We're partners walking this journey of life together. But it is only possible when the parent is firmly planted in a philosophy that believes that each person is here on earth to fulfill their own manifesto, their own expression of self. If we haven't discovered that for ourselves and we are still tethered to the ideas and prescriptions of culture, then of course we're going to tether our children to our ideas and prescriptions. When we free ourselves and we experience the emancipation of that freedom, we want to give that to our children. Like, hey, it doesn't matter to me what you do, what you choose. Of course, I would like you to be happy and successful and mentally healthy, but I can't control that beyond the way I show up. My only control is how I show up. And so the conscious parent makes a pledge to show up in the most whole, abundant way possible. And that's really the only work we have to do as a parent, is show up abundant and whole so we don't dump our crap on our children. And that's it. It's actually so simple, but it is the hardest thing in the world to do because we are so indoctrinated to own our children, to possess and control them.
I have so many questions just coming from that response, but I want to ask you more or less, like, for someone that where more or less does the actual fear come from to become a parent? Like, I'm not a parent yet and I'm afraid to become a parent.
You should be very afraid.
Why is that though? Like, where does that, is that fear associated once again with cultural differences or knowing your worth? Or is it more or less like, I'm afraid to stuff up the kid?
Yeah, you will F up the kid. I've already effed up my kid. I effed up my kid within the first 3 years, and I kept doing a great job at that. That I got an A+ in. So, parents want to be perfect and parents want to be in control. That's the traditional parenting paradigm that we have all been raised with. So that's why you're so scared. You're like, I don't want to F up, because the idea is that we need to be perfect and have control over our children and raise amazing children. My goodness, that is like a seriously scary proposition. But we do it with some delusion of narcissism that we can do it. We can create perfect children. And then when you have children and they are completely feral and wild and out of control, they're really, because you realize, my goodness, they have their own will and their own voice. And now you're in conflict because you're like, the reality is I can't control this kid. But the traditional parenting paradigm has told me I need to have uber control. Now I'm feeling like a failure. And now I don't know what to do. So traditionally, what parents do is that they hunker down even more. They're like, I will have control, right? So we yell, we scream, we punish, we ground, we threaten, we rage, we scream, we yell, we abuse, we slap, we just go crazy because we're looking for that control that we were told by the traditional paradigm that we should have. And my model says, you have no control. You will never have control. So when you surrender to that, now you can have a good time at parenting because you're not stuck under this image of being the perfect parent who's going to have the perfect child. There's no perfect parent and there's no perfect child. That's how I start my book, The Conscious Parent. There is no such thing as perfect parent and perfect child. And when you let go of that, you actually ease into the mess and chaos of parenting, which it is. It is completely a mess. It's a shitstorm. It's out of control. And instead of looking for control, you surrender to the beauty of the chaos. And now you're a very different parent. You're like, I don't know. One mother once told me, okay, Dr. Shefali, I think what you're trying to tell me is I just need to be an idiot mommy. And I said, yes, you do. You need to be if that's what it means to be quiet and just witness the beauty of your children. If for you that means being an idiot, yes, be an idiot. I teach parents how to shut up, how to be quiet, how to not talk. And they're like, oh, so I shouldn't talk. I go, yes, because everything that's coming out of your mouth is judgment, is lack, is scarcity, and is your projection. So why don't we be quiet? So I'm a very quiet parent because everything I want to say is to control my kid. Today, my kid is 18. I literally, in my opinion, was being so rational. I just asked her a question. I swear to you, she screamed at me. Now, I wanted to scream back. I was triggered, but I know now that, oh, she was feeling controlled. I was asking a controlling question, but to me, it was as simple as, did you put off the lights in your room? To
Mm.
her, it was, why are you always asking me whether I put off the lights in my room? I did. You don't trust me. You don't care about it. You think I'm an idiot. Like, she answered me like I was like killing her. And teenagers react like this, and we parents can't stand it, right? We want to annihilate them. But I teach parents that our kids are so overmanaged and so overproduced by us that even when we ask them, like, I was just asking a simple question, and it wasn't simple, it was loaded, right? But to me it was simple, to her it was loaded. I was asking her, Maya, you need a roommate for college. I need to know who your roommate is, right? Such
Mm.
a simple question, such a loving question, right? But to the kid, it was like, I don't know what I'm doing in my life. I don't even know what I'm going to eat today. Like, I was asking her for something beyond her scope because it was an adult, future based planning, organizing, anxiety based question from me. I was anxious. I was like, can we please get our shit together? And to her, it was controlling, which it was. And she screamed at me. A traditional parent would have screamed back and would have ruined everything. A conscious parent like me, who's trained to, to know that I'm always effing up, I was just quiet and I told myself, obviously, she's under stress.
Mm.
Obviously, this creates anxiety. So, conscious parenting looks beneath the behavior and understands the feeling. But listen, it's really hard to do. Let me not give you any illusion, you non parent, that it's easy to do. You want to choke your kid almost every
Mm.
minute. You want to take their body and lock it up. Okay. It's like you're fighting that instinct all the time. And then you're horrified that you're a horrible person.
Mm.
I discovered I was a horrible person by the time my daughter was maybe 14 days old, right? I wanted her to stop crying. I was like, why are you crying? I was cursing her in my head at 14 days. Then you are in shame. Why am I doing this? No one told me that I would be such a horrible person, right? Because no one prepares us for the shitstorm that this parenting journey is. And I'm trying to prepare parents that your ego is going to come up so big
Mm.
and all your lack is going to come up and you're going to totally mess it up. Now, if I was prepared, which I eventually became prepared at the cost of my child and her sanity, now after 18 years, I can shut up.
Mm.
But my goodness, the first 3 years, I was losing it. Like, if I said, let's have milk, and she said no, the traditional model told me, oh, see, she's not respecting you. She doesn't love you. You have no authority. Kill her, like annihilate her, destroy her. So I would scream. And then I would, I saw my little child crumble in tears. So this is the reality of parenting. And we parents don't understand how the traditional model sets us up to actually be control freaks.
Mm. So what if you have an unruly child in your midst and you can't really like help them stop being unruly?
Yeah. Yeah. The more you try to stop it, the more unruly they're going to get, because you're talking about that particular kid who's the wild child, right? So you have several types of kids. I don't want to typecast kids, but you have the sweet tempered, temperament is a thing. So you have some kids who are just so sweet, and then some kids who the parent will say, I swear to you, in the womb, she was a devil. The devil has come out of my womb. So what they mean is that you have the strong-willed child, right? And the strong-willed child, I love the strong-willed child, even though they're a pain in the butt, because they force the parent to check their own control issues. The sweet child, you can just run a ship over, you can control them, and then you think you're a great parent. But the strong-willed child is the one who tests you. And I always call those children our awakeners, because
Mm.
they're here to be a thorn in your ego's side and not do what your ego wants. And you're in a controlling match, but it's an opportunity to see how out of control your ego is. The kid is not out of control. The ego of the parent is out of control.
Mm. You make a very good point there. Now, I personally, I'm very curious about this. because I was raised with the belt. I wasn't abused. I was if I did something wrong, then my parents would discipline me in that respect, and then I would not do it again. And I think there's this like that term, like I was raised with a healthy dose of respect growing up, that sort of thing. And I'm always curious about, and I probably don't know too much about this. This is why I'm learning from you, Dr. Shefali. Um, what is the best way to discipline our child? Like in terms of if they're not the wild child, but they're the silent, the silent one that does sort of like the cheeky stuff. Like, should we be removing the belt or the paddle, and should we be still sending them to timeouts, or what should we be doing?
So can I challenge you a little bit?
Yes.
Okay. So you said you weren't abused. That is abuse. But you have created a beautiful narrative around it because you became a splendid young man. And so you're like, I turned out just fine. I deserved that. That actually kept me in check. You've created a beautiful narrative, but in truth, that was abusive.
Right.
100%. So the traditional model does use the belt and the paddle and the timeout and the coercion and the control. And my model doesn't. So my kid is the wild child. And because I couldn't control her, because that wasn't my mission. My mission wasn't to silence my kid or to scare them into compliance. You were scared into compliance. You never grew into a healthy compliance. You were fear-mongered into silence. And it worked for you because you're just a well-adaptive child and you became a well-adaptive adult. But if I took you back to how that felt, you would tell me it felt horrible.
It sucked.
And it sucked.
Big time.
Big time. And you were scared.
100%.
Yeah. And you also had resentment and anger, which you have now sublimated. I don't know whether you ever rebelled or acted out again. You were just the good boy, weren't you?
I was the different one. Like my older brother, he rebelled, and he was more the wild child. He was openly rebellious. I was more inwardly rebellious in a way. But I would create stories. Like my parents would always tell me, my mum especially, she'd be like, make sure that you tell the truth. Are you actually saying this is what happened, or is this what's going on in your mind? And then I create a lot of lies growing up because I had this.
How do you think that fear-based compliance affected you in your adult life, in your relationship?
Well, I didn't want to do the wrong thing because I knew what was coming. If I did, it was either going to be mum, or it would be if mum couldn't discipline me and I wasn't getting the message, which happened a few times, then my dad would come home and he heard a lot more than my mum. So it would be like, okay, how do I try and work my way out of this? So that's where the lying also came into play.
But do you feel that in your adult life, teenagehood and adult life, you now have a fear of failure, or you have a fear of consequences or messing up, and it's created a barrier within you? Or do you feel like you have zero issues because of it?
I got many issues. I got stacks of issues, but failure for me, and like I've been through heaps of failures before. I would say, Dr. Shefali, that 100% I was afraid of failure. I didn't want to fail. That just made me feel like I was absolutely worthless. Now that I've been through so many failures, now I look at it as a good thing. And I've just had that mind shift. And I've had conversations with my mum. I've grown up a lot, and I've had my own, I guess you could say, radical awakening. And I've realized a lot of things in my life that, hey, that's happened to me. But now I realize, hey, it doesn't have to really define where I'm going in my life now.
Correct, because you did the work. So you're unique, and you had your awakening and you healed yourself. But there are many, many people out there who cannot recover from that kind of severe punishment.
Mm. Is that because they're sort of trapping themselves even more? Is it because
Yes, because
yeah.
then that external oppressor becomes internalized. You were able to get rid of it and work out of it and transcend and heal. But that is why you have turned out the way you did. But that was the good thing, not your parents abusing you. That could have gone very wrong had you not done all this work. So, what I'm trying to plead to parents is, why are you making your kids do all this work? You
Mm.
know, can you just find another way to communicate? You know, I've never slapped my kid, and
Mm.
she was wild and rude and disrespectful in all traditional ways. But I made a pledge to myself that I will not be lazy. See, I call hitting and paddling lazy parenting and unconscious parenting and abusive parenting. And I'm very outrageously, vehemently against it.
Mm.
Uh, in any way, because you are now suppressing the child, you're shaming the child. The child now has a healthy dose of distrust, because caregivers are not supposed to be abusive. They
Mm.
can be they could have understood you, they could have listened to you, they could have honored you, they could have uh, had compassion for you. There's so many things we can do to communicate what we need to communicate. Our children are not our property. And when we abuse them, we are objectifying them, we are humiliating them, we are shaming them, and we are treating them as our property. We have no right to be abusive to our children, just like we have no right to raise a hand on an adult. We
Mm.
would never raise our hand on an adult, but we raise our hand on our children because they are smaller and less mighty. And we have this traditional model in us that we are in control. The child needs to be disciplined in these ways, and they are our puppets, they are our objects. It is so unhealthy. And this is the reason why we have an unhealthy earth,
Mm.
because of our parents following the traditional model of abusing our children.
Mm. So, okay, this is going to make me even more curious. For you, were you disciplined like I was growing up? Like, did you have the belt, the paddle, and all that sort of stuff?
No, I didn't. I didn't at all. I think I was slapped one time by my mom and one time by my dad. And I remember both times, and both times they apologized to me.
Mm.
And now when I bring it up to them, they literally don't remember the slap or the apology. And they were like so relieved that they apologized. They're like, oh, we did? Thank goodness. So you don't talk badly about us. But I was raised with a great deal of healthy attachment and nurturing, which is why I think I've taken it upon myself to pass on this abundance to others and help others heal. I have no judgment towards parents like yours or people who do this. I understand that they are intoxicated by this indoctrination of traditional parenting. They are just following the rule book. Rule book says hit your kid, hit your kid. The Bible, according to them, says hit your kid, right? So uh, don't spare the rod, right? The
Mm.
Bible says that, according to these people. So I get it. They were intoxicated. They were unconscious. But I am a vehement opposer against this. I mean, there is no circumstance where you can belt your kid or paddle your kid. No circumstance. And parents are always like, but what if the kid is like really rude? I'm like, nope. Nope. You find a way to communicate, and you don't teach respect through suppression. You just don't, because it will have a negative consequence in that child's life. You get control, but now they have to deal with their fear for the rest of their lives.
Mm.
You dealt with it, but you went on a journey to deal with it. And I'm saying, save us, save these children the journey. You know, there's always going to be messing the kid up, but can you mess them up less?
Mm. Yeah, that's a good question. I like
Yes,
I like that
that's
one.
the dangling question.
Yeah, 100%. Like, and for you, Dr. Shefali, like when you did become a mother for the first time, when you became a parent, was there anything that sort of happened to you, like that your daughter did starting out at any particular age, that sort of gave you a very renewed perspective on your life at all?
Yes, that's when I started doing this writing about it. It was when she was around 3 years old, and I had yelled yet another time, and I saw her crumbling before me. I
Mm.
literally remember her dissociating. Like I saw the light. I know it sounds dramatic, but to me, it felt like I literally saw the light go out of her eyes.
Mm.
And that was so traumatic. I was present for it. So that's the first thing I was aware. And it horrified me because I saw what I did. I saw how I shamed her and made her feel small. And that was my wake up call that what are you doing? And I began to realize, because I had been meditating, you wouldn't have been able to know that, but I had been meditating for 11 years by then. And I knew through meditation that there is such a thing as this false ego that comes out wanting control. And I'm like, holy moly, I didn't know that that same ego will come out in the most precious relationship of my life. I couldn't believe that the person I adore the most, I am being a rageful lunatic with. And that's when I went on a serious, I first became depressed a little bit, and then went through an identity crisis of what kind of parent am I? And who is this monster within me? And I began to identify it as my ego wanting control because I was in lack. And then I said to myself, well, if I'm going through this and I've been a meditator and I'm a psychologist, what chance do other parents have? Everyone is really effing up. And I began to write about it. And then parents were angry with me, and my message didn't take off the ground, and I was being hated upon and rejected and fired by my clients.
Wow.
But I stayed the course because I knew that it was our ego. If it was my ego, it was everybody's ego. And I was here to blast the parents' ego. And it was very unpopular at first. And it's still unpopular. I'm not mainstream, but I can never be mainstream because the mainstream message is antithetical to my message. It's the direct opposite of my message. So I get why I'm not popular, but I have realized that that's my mission, is to help parents heal themselves.
So what would you do, or how would you kind of word the conversation around if someone does disagree with your approach to parenting? Like you mentioned that you have had a lot of, I guess you could say, vicious people hating the message. And
Yeah.
what did you do back then as opposed to what you do now?
So back then, I used to get pissed off. I wanted to slap them into awareness. And then I learned that the ego is formidable. And the reason they're resisting me is because I'm attacking their ego, and their ego is going to fight back. So I used to, the best way I found to enter the heart of the parent is to take them back to their own childhood, like I did with you, and show them that it sucked. And make them reconnect to their own pain. And then they can have empathy for what their children are going through. But it takes time, and it takes a lot of patience on my part, because the parent's ego is strong and defended and vicious, and it wants to be in control. So I'm here telling them you can't be in control, and they are fighting me. So I get it. And now it's much easier. Now only people who are pro my message come to me. So I've self-selected my audience. And so now I have an easier time, and I tell people, if you don't want to really do the inner work, I'm not the person for you. If you want traditional meds or you want traditional techniques, don't come to me. Like now I have power to say that because I'm not in lack anymore. But before I used to take it very personally, and it was a growing experience to get to this place.
I mean, it's hard not to take it personally because it is attacking your own ego at the same time. So you got two
Exactly.
egos fighting it out. It's like, which one's going to win? It's like,
Exactly. So then I realized, how can I heal people when I'm full of ego? So I needed to really work through it and realize that they're just in fear, and it's a new message, and it's scary, and have compassion. And if you care about the children, you need to first care about the parent. So I began to nurture the parent's inner wounded child, like I was beginning to do with yours. Like, wow, what did you go through? And when I was empathizing with the parent's inner child, the parent then grows up and heals, and then they can take care of their children. So my mission is to help parents heal their own inner child.
Dr. Shefali, I do want to be mindful of your time. I'm really enjoying this. I've got a couple more questions for you, if you don't mind. So Your new book, A Radical Awakening, if I was to pick up a copy right now and turn to any page or chapter that is going to give me a challenge, is going to give me really the most out of the book. There might be a very difficult question to answer, but which page or chapter would you recommend that I turn to first?
Oh, oh, that's not fair because the book is laid out as a journey. It's laid out as a process. So I
Mm,
would say page one, because it takes you down, it uncovers layer by layer your egos. So in chapter one, I talk about what is the ego. It's the false self. It's the self that's been created because of fear. In chapter two, I talk about the faces of our ego, the good child, the rebellious child, the comedian, the people pleaser. And then I talk about our biology, our lack of ownership of our sexuality. And then in part four, I talk about how to transcend the ego. And I give real time tools for how to create boundaries, how to enter your sovereign self, how to honor your worth, how to speak up for and be your best ally. So I take people down this path.
I'm curious about the people pleasing part because that relates to me.
Yeah, well,
Quite a bit.
and most women. So, and most good children.
Mm,
So yeah, we people please because we are indoctrinated to get love when we please people, and
mm,
that's how then we're called the good one, and that gives us worth. So we identify as that good person, the people pleaser, and what price we pay for that is that we abnegate and divorce our own opinion, our own voice. We put other people first, we save other people, we rescue them, and we grow resentful. We become victims and martyrs, and we divorce from our own power. And I was a people pleaser all my life. I still am. And I just have it under control now a little bit. It was out of control before.
mm.
Like there was nothing I wouldn't do to get love that way. I'll do anything for you, but I wasn't doing it out of a place of sacred sovereignty. I was doing it to get love back, and then when I didn't get the love back, I was angry and resentful and I was burning out. People pleasers burn out a lot because they're pleasing everyone around them and they're not taking care of themselves.
I can't begin to tell you how much I relate to that.
Yeah.
it's,
Yeah.
but yeah, it's been one heck of a journey, I have to say so myself. This is a question that I love asking people. I've only recently started asking this one, but when in your life that you least expected something big to happen, that's happened and it has given you once again a renewed perspective on your life, or it's given you a challenge, um, and you least expected it to happen.
Something I least expected to happen
Yeah.
was my entire parenting epiphany. I didn't expect ever to write about conscious parenting. I never, when I became a parent, thought I would become an advocate for children. I thought I liked them, but I didn't realize I would become their advocate.
Mm,
I did, and none of this was expected, and all of it is a surprise. Even talking to you, I don't underestimate anything.
mm,
I take it all with great humility, but nothing is planned. Even this book, A Radical Awakening, 2 years ago, I would have never thought that this book would come out. So what I am alluding to is that life is eternally unpredictable. And there's so much joy and serendipity when you surrender to the newness. Like right now, I have an agent, and I always tell her, I don't want to know my future. Do
mm,
not over control the outcome. Don't ask. So, for example, I just did a podcast with Oprah,
mm,
which will be releasing next month. And my agent wanted to ask for more things. And I said, I want to be surprised. I want it to come out of the ether. I don't want to ask. I don't want to impose my own agenda. I want to see what will come. And she loves that about me. And I love that approach because I don't want to plan my life too much. I want to see. I want to do my due diligence, but I don't want to over zealously control what, I don't want to ask you, for example, where will you post this interview? How many people are watching it? I don't ask, if I agree, I show up and I want to be surprised. There's so much joy in going with the unknown. For me, I've befriended the unknown. I love the unknown. I want to see what will happen. That's why I don't want to control my daughter. I don't want to prescribe her life, because then it's boring. It's my life. I want to see what will happen when I just sit back and allow things to unfold. So I'm very comfortable with that. For example, something quite tragic happened to me recently in my work situation. One of my employees quote unquote, betrayed me. And I'm sorry to talk like this, but I'm like excited by the betrayal. I'm like, oh my goodness, now what's going to happen? Who is the new Shefali that's going to emerge from this betrayal? What's going to happen now? Like, I've never been betrayed like that. Wow. Like, I'm excited by it, even though it was so tragic. So all I'm saying is that I've learned to lean into the uncertainty of life. And I find great joy and excitement in trying to figure out, who will I show up as? I don't want to control who I will show up as. I want it to be spontaneous,
I appreciate you sharing that, especially the betrayal part, because no one wants to go through that. And I actually say this in my very first book, which is pretty exciting. I say at the very beginning, everyone, I believe, wishes they all had a roadmap that was given a glimpse into their future. They could see everything that was going to happen. Like, doesn't matter what it is. They just want to know the answers. But that's not part of life. And where would be the fun? Where would be the joy? Where would be the questions coming from? Where would be the curiosity? You wouldn't have anything because you'd know everything that's going to come your way. So what would be the point?
That is so beautiful and so wise. And for someone young like you to get that at that age is so amazing. That's exactly it. The nature of life is that it's unknown. And we are at loggerheads with the nature of life. That's why we suffer. If we could flow with the nature of life, life is constantly saying, I'm changing, I'm changing, I'm changing, I'm changing. But we keep under this illusion that it's not changing. Then when it changes, we're angry. But life is just doing what life is doing. Life is amazing, but it is highly unpredictable. And so are children. That's why I love the journey of parenthood, because it trains you to let go of expectations and control. And I love that. I love that rebellious child who forces the parent to give up their access of control.
I can't wait one day to become a parent, but I'm also, like I said before, scared. But anyway, sort of finishing up this conversation, Dr. Shefali, 2 final questions. This is my all-time favorite question. I ask everyone at the end. It's a hypothetical one, but I want you to imagine with me for a moment that you've been able to reach the age of 100. All your friends and your family have decided to put together a film for you of everything you've ever said and everything you've ever done. Don't ask me how in the world they got it all. We'll call it magic for the sake of argument. But they've been able to get it and show it to you on your 100th birthday. What do you want that film to say and to show about your life?
That she wasn't afraid to piss people off and live her authentic self.
Do you feel like anything is missing in your life currently?
I've really developed an attitude of completion. So I've learned to harness an attitude of wholeness. So people, have bucket lists. I have no bucket list. Like, if I never see another country, another island, I've learned to bloom where I am. And that's taken cultivation of this attitude of it is what it is. And this is exactly how it's meant to be. And I've really learned to love the isness of my life, even when I'm betrayed, for example, or going through a hardship. I really have learned that is the best attitude to have. I'm sorry to say I have the best attitude, but I've learned through wisdom that the isness is the isness. So you can fight it or you can surrender to it. And I've learned great joy can be had when you surrender to it, and great suffering can be had when you resist it. I refuse to resist my isness. I just know it causes suffering. So I refuse to be an idiot,
I love that. Dr. Shefali, where can people connect with you, buy a new book? You've also got a Mind Valley course, which people can learn more about being more of a conscious parent. Where can people go and get that and learn more
Right. So
about
I
you?
have this amazing course with Mind Valley. It's called a Quest. It's only 30 days. And
Mm.
in 30 days, we transform your whole parenting. And I believe every non parent and parent should take it. I'm very proud of that course. So they can go to mindvalley.com and look up Dr. Shefali and take that quest for 30 days. So easy. It's like literally 10, 15 minutes a day, but it's so effective and amazing. So I love that course. And in terms of my stuff, I have a coaching institute where I coach people to become conscious parenting coaches. So they can find that on my website, drshefali.com. They can go to my website, buy my new book. I have tons of courses. I have relationship courses, meditation courses, manifestation courses. So I have so much stuff on my website, but they can just go there and explore and see what works for them.
And I'll make sure that all the links are in the show notes below for people to check out. But Dr. Shefali, thank you so much for your time today and for coming on the Storybox podcast.
I'm so proud of what you do. I'm here to support you and keep on doing what you do. You're amazing. Thank you for having me as a guest.